Hello and welcome to WEAG TV. You've tuned in to episode 47 of Beyond a Sermon. I am show host and communications director Jim Washock, and I am joined this week, as most weeks, with our lead pastor, Shane Schlesman. Hey, Shane.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Once again.
Happy April 9th.
And thanks for tuning in
Yes.
every week to watch us. And those of you who are live, thank you so much for taking this time out right now. And those of you who are watching this after the fact, so glad you're watching also.
Definitely, definitely. Tuning in, you know, that just made me think of our conversation beforehand about crank calls and phones and things that today's kids are missing out.
We were talking prehistoric kinds of things.
Yeah. But it's funny to hear youth like still refer to like dial a number or even tape a show. Yeah. And it's like, that just, I guess it's not going to go away. Yeah. I
Or
wonder if they even know what
Xerox a copy. Do we still Xerox a copy?
I don't know. Do we? I try not to use paper anymore, but here we go. We've got paper because we got a lot of questions to go through and so forth. So for those of you that may be tuning in for the first time, what is this show all about? Well, what we do every week is we dig deeper. We go beyond a sermon to explore the previous Sunday's message and extract from it kind of takeaways that we can apply to everyday life, no matter whether we're a teenager in school or whether we got a job or if we're a pastor as well. Right, Shane?
I love this time. It's just a really good time just to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
And I hope you join us.
And you are welcome to join in on the conversation, especially if you are watching right now at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays when we record this live. You have the opportunity to use the chat window to the side to go ahead and ask a question that comes to your mind at any point during our roughly half-hour program. So just create any old nickname you want. You can be Batman, Iron Man if you wish, SpongeBob, whatever you like. No account is required. Just enter a name and type your question. Now, Shane, before we get started, we hit a milestone this week that's momentous, I think.
Wow.
We have now accumulated over 250,000 minutes viewed on our YouTube channel.
Wow.
Yes. WEAG TV.
250,000
minutes viewed. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. In just about a year's time, too.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Thank you to the entire communications team. Thank you for everybody at WEAG who saw this vision with me and dreamed about people who maybe weren't present in the building, but who would be watching in. So, and if that's one of you, thank you so much for watching some of those minutes with us.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so of our we got 240 videos. So on average, that's about 18 hours viewed of each video on average. Of course, they're different lengths and so forth. But within the top 5 total, highest watched, are this series.
Really?
Yeah, which is amazing because you figured the videos that have been out the oldest have the longest time to accumulate minutes. So people are digging WEAG 3.0, Shane.
Man, can I redo the series now? I didn't know it was going to be like that. I feel like I want to go back and repreach that a little bit.
Well,
wow, that's
I know
pretty
you've got more series to get onto. So let's go ahead and get started into this show. Again, a reminder, use the chat area to go ahead and ask your question. And even if you're watching on demand, use the comment area and we will get your question to Shane. So Shane, to get started into this, you've delivered the final installment of the 3-week series for WEAG 3.0, even though you mentioned this isn't going to be the last of WEAG 3.0, but for this series. And you, a number of times in this past Sunday, you mentioned God never starts with the details, doesn't call us to the details. He starts with direction. And so what I want to ask you is, how might we be content with the direction that God gives even when the details are not conveyed?
I don't have a great answer for this, but I think it involves building and growing in our trust with God because of the way God's worked in my life and the way God works in Scripture and the way I've seen God work so often in so many other people's lives as well. And perhaps you've experienced this, that God usually calls us to some big direction. He wants us to head in this direction. He has things that he wants us to do, but he doesn't give us the specifics. I wish he would. He doesn't say, Jim, you have to be a marketing person. He says, Jim, I want you to give your life to me. I want you to win other people to me. He talks about some of the kingdom language that defines who we are, not what we do. But we live in a world that defines what we do, or defines who we are by what we do. And so first thing I ask you when you go to parties, what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
And
Yeah.
I think it stems from there, and it goes all the way down into details. There's certain people who are more detailed-oriented than others. I'm not a detailed-oriented person, but I love people who are, especially those around me. But I also know that sometimes there can be some danger in the details, because if I have to have the details to understand whether or not I'm going to do this, I'm not sure. When God approaches us and you say that's really dangerous. When you say, I don't know, God, I'm not sure I'm willing to do that, what does it look like? Tell me the details. Lay out the plan for me and let me weigh and see if I like the details. And the danger of the details is that I need to be in charge. If we're really honest with ourselves, part of what makes us uncomfortable not knowing details could be at times that I feel a little worried that someone else is in charge. If you don't give me the details first so that I can feel confident and in charge and make a decision for myself as to whether I'll be involved, whether I like the details. If I like the details, I'll be involved. If I don't like the details, I won't. Well, thankfully, Joshua didn't ask that question.
Right.
He was just told, be strong and courageous, and he was our example these past 3 Sundays. To be strong and courageous and say, when God calls me to a direction, I'm heading in the direction. I'm already headed there. I know that God will give me the details as I go. And in this case, sometimes the details are not just dangerous because of me being in control versus God, but also they can be dangerous in the sense of they could be so overwhelming, I may never head in that direction.
That's true. Yes. Yes.
If the nation of Israel knew that they were crossing the Jordan to go into war, and then they knew the unconventional ways that God might do it, they probably never would have crossed. They'd still be there on the other side.
That sign-up sheet would have had 2 names on it.
Yeah, that's right. So I think really the essence comes down to trust. God calls me to something. Really, you ask yourself, do I trust God? Is God in this direction? And if God's in this direction, then God will be also in the details that follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. You also said, I think of one person who did get a lot of details. That was Noah. He had a lot of details on how to build that boat, right? Speaking of boats, you said this phrase, we are not launching a cruise ship. We are launching a battleship. Yeah. Of course, not everyone is ready to run towards battle, though, Shane. So my question to you is, for those who don't feel quite ready to join the fight, or maybe new in their walk with Jesus, nonetheless, how might they be able to support the war effort? And maybe you should tell people, what do we mean by war? In case they missed the sermon, like, wait, WEAG's going to war? Yeah,
so the illustration is the nation of Israel, who's crossing the Jordan in a new direction. It's a new chapter of their life. And we've been referencing that and applying it to what really WEAG's history, WEAG 3.0 being the 3rd chapter in our history, a new chapter moving forward. So just like that, the nation of Israel was heading into a battle. And whenever we take new ground in life, you better believe there's going to be a battle involved. You can't do something great and really take new ground and new strides in your life without fighting a battle. You don't get stronger without resistance. You don't get better without work. And that's not just a worldly perspective. That is actually a kingdom perspective as well, that there is sacrifice to my calling, and that is a biblical principle that God has practiced since the beginning of time. However, in our practical life, I understand that not everyone's like, boy, I don't know, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And listen, there were people in the nation of Israel who were the first group across. There were 30 or 40,000 soldiers who crossed over ahead. In other words, they put them in front. Those people were the people with the swords drawn, the arrows ready, the slings ready. They were ready to go to battle. Those also, and were different stages of life. There were different people behind them that were at different abilities, that were not necessarily the frontline soldiers, but they were more the backline suppliers. They were, you were either part of the supply chain and bringing what was needed, or you were a part of the front line, the tip of the spear, so to speak, as you cross. And there's room for all of that. But make no mistake, we are entering a battle. We're not entering new territory that we are welcomed in. And in a spiritual sense, speaking in a spiritual sense, that God is wanting to take new ground in our city. And we aren't always welcomed in to that new ground. So taking and advancing is definitely a warrior's mindset. But the two practical things I would say is, if you're like, I'm not sure, first I would say, grow with us. Let God keep taking new ground in you. We just want you to come here to West End Assembly of God, and we want to see every person experience transformation through Jesus Christ. Yeah. We want God to transform your life. So grow with us. We're just all a group of people who are messy and broken, just like you, and we're growing, and we just grow with us. And then secondly, help us grow. Even while you're not sure of what that's happening, invite other people, tell them about what's happening, and tell them to tune in online or come to a service on a Sunday morning, or come to one of the many ministries that are happening every day and every night around this building. But grow with us and help us grow.
Absolutely. Both in battle and on a battleship, as well as on a basketball court during an NCAA men's tournament game. There are lots of roles and responsibilities. And what are the roles and responsibilities that you see potentially being available to the WEAG community to step into this battle for the souls of Richmond and beyond?
Yeah, that illustration of a battleship, I wish I was a Navy guy right now that I could rattle off all the different positions, but I know there's a captain and a first mate and all the different, I won't go beyond that because I'll mess up and I'll really show how foolish I am. But I think the point of it really starts at the sailors. It starts with the people who are on the ship, that this is not a cruise liner that we're just bringing everything to you, but that everybody is important. If God's brought you to West End Assembly of God during this season, He's brought you here for a reason. And so everyone has a role. Everyone has a role. Now that's up to you if you decide to answer that kind of a call. Yeah. But everyone can have a role, and everyone can have, whether it's greeting people in your section of the worship center here, or during a Sunday morning service, or inviting new people, getting involved in a small group, or getting involved in one of the many ministries that are happening in music and fine arts, or family life, or our groups ministries. How we get involved, our men's ministries, our women's ministries, getting other people involved, and everyone has a role. And we desire that if you're on the ship, we want you to have we believe that God brought you here for a reason, and we want you to discover your purpose and then make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. We want to give a reminder too, for those of you that are watching either live at 3 p.m. on Tuesdays or on demand at a later point in time, please use either the chat window for live or the comments area at a later point in time to ask your questions, and you'll be able to get Shane's response to that.
Yeah, love to hear from you.
Definitely. Shane, you brought up how once the Israelites crossed over the river, as soon as they got on dry ground, the river rushed back to the flood stages that it was at. And you talked about too how Jesus was adamant about how we're not to look to our past. That is so hard to do. I gotta admit, Captain Hindsight, who's a legit animated character, is like my favorite person because I can relate so much. It's so difficult to not look at our past and believe things were better. How do we resist this hindsight perspective?
Well, I would say first that part of the reason why it's difficult to not look back and say, well, things were better before, is because it's so difficult to move forward. When you talk about taking new ground, I can't enter a new exercise program, a new diet program without thinking about how great it was when I was 20, and I didn't have to worry about this,
True.
And in some cases it's true.
Yeah.
In some cases you're right. This was better, or there was something greater here. But the point is that it's difficult to move forward. So that's part of the reason we like to look back, because it's so challenging from wherever we are at right now, with the challenges that face our culture today, with the challenges that face our teenagers today. People say, well, back when I did youth ministry. Well, you don't even understand what it is to be in a 24/7, never disconnected world where everyone has access to me and I have access to everyone. That's a different kind of ministry. And it's so difficult to take new ground in our culture and in new things that sometimes it's easier to look back and say, yeah, things are, I remember this, remember that. And at the same time, it's important to remember. I mean, Isaiah 43, the prophet Isaiah says, we are serving a God who, remember the God who took us across the Red Sea on dry ground, and who took us, who extinguished our enemies and snuffed them out like a wick. And he gives these descriptive, he even uses battleships, by the way, where the ships came into the sea, and God took new ground, freed us from our captors. And so he gives this beautiful description. Never forget, always remember. And then the next phrase out of his mouth, he says, forget the former things which are behind you. God is doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? And so I think part of why we don't perceive it is because we look back fondly because it's so difficult to move forward. And also because there's this idea that God is asking us to say, hey, don't forget the past. He isn't saying forget what happened. He's saying remember what God did, but forget the way he did it. Remember what God did, but forget the way he did it, because he's going to do it a new way.
Sure. Yeah.
He didn't cross across the Red Sea. He had two walls of water walked across. Is the imagery that's given us in Scripture in Exodus. By the time we get to Joshua, it's this new chapter. Now we're crossing a river that's flooding the banks, and he stops it on one end and builds it up. Did he do it the same? Did he do the same thing? Yes, he did it a different way. So God is still on the scene at West End Assembly of God, doing great things for God in Richmond, Virginia. But let's forget that the way he did it, so that God can be the creative God that he is. And he's constantly creating. He's constantly doing a new way. Could he do it exactly the way he did it before? Absolutely, he could. That's just not the kind of God he is.
Yeah.
He's a creative God who desires to constantly be changing, constantly be moving. He wants his message to reach every part, by the way, of culture that's constantly changing. And for that truth to find its way in the hearts of people who have changed. And so God is constantly evolving. And that's, I think we have to resist the urge to say that God shows up the same way that he showed up before. While we remember that God did the work that he did, also remember that he desires to do it again, but to do it in a new and fresh way.
Okay. So to move forward, to take this difficult step of moving forward, you outlined three things for us to do. And that was to commit to answer the call to commit and to consecrate ourselves. But within commit specifically, you told us to commit our time, commit our talent and our treasure.
Yeah.
Do you mind addressing how exactly do those three things tie into the expansion, leverage, and launch of WEAG? And how do we as WEAGers, as individuals, collectively commit those three things?
Yeah, well, speaking of old school, that's a really old school way of describing that time, talent, treasure. It's been around in church world forever, kind of preacher talk for these three categories in our life that are important. That is, redeem the time because your days are numbered. That was a concept that God gave Moses, that we only have so much time. So every one of these things, our time, our talent, and our treasure, is we offer them in worship to God. We offer them, if you're going to worship and you're going to offer your time, your abilities, and your money to God, then do it as an act of worship. Do it also as a discipline. I worship God in times of sorrow. I worship God in times of joy. I give my time and I serve when I don't feel like it and when I'm excited to do it. It's a discipline. It's an act of worship, but it's a discipline. And then lastly, give my time, my talent, my treasure as a sacrifice. God never measures the amount, just the amount of time or the amount of money or the amount of abilities. He measures the sacrifice of you putting it on the altar and saying, this, God, it's your time. It's your abilities. You've given me these abilities, but they're yours. It's your money. I'm going to give to you as an act of worship. I'm going to give to you as a discipline. I'm going to do it regular, whether by little. That's why we talk about giving percentages around here, to give a percentage. And then I'm going to do it sacrificially. And that's what God is asking. He's not measuring the amount. He's measuring the sacrifice. And it's a great sacrifice to say, hey, I'm coming into, and we're asking people at West End Assembly God to be part of our launch team, to be part of considering coming on the battleship and taking a role and picking up a way to worship, serve, and lead together, and do so as an act of worship, do so as a discipline, and do so sacrificially.
Yeah, yeah. Many times when we hear the word launch, we naturally think of a countdown and an action of considerable force, right? It might be the launch of a roller coaster, it might be a rocket.
Yeah.
Now that WEAG 3.0 is underway, what sort of actions and developments supportive of that concept of a launch can WEAGers look forward to in the weeks and months ahead?
Yeah, well, let me frame this answer. First, whenever you set out a huge goal, this is not, there's time that has to happen to develop the resources necessary, to develop the strategies, to develop the plans, to develop the practice, for all of that to become a reality, right?
Yeah.
And if it's a big enough goal, that doesn't happen in just a few months, right?
Yeah.
It happens sometimes in years. I remember desiring to want to do an Ironman, and I remember having no concept what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And talking to a friend who did some triathlons and understood that, and when I said, hey, I want to do an Ironman, when is the next one? He said, dude, you don't just sign up for an Ironman, unless you want to die.
That's right.
That's a goal you set out like a year or two from now. And then you begin to change your life, everything about it, the way you work out, the way you eat, the way you exercise, everything that you train for this. So we've set out a huge goal to be one church in many locations. We've said that we want every generation and every culture to influence and leverage everything that God has brought together in 50 years of ministry, to leverage everything towards that goal. That takes years to accomplish. So if you're looking for Easter Sunday to where are the other locations, that's not a very big goal. That'd have been too low of a bar. This is going to take a long time to hit. And what they can look forward to is right now. But let's go all the way back to where we live today. First, we have this amazing, so many great things happening here. But let me just introduce one. Okay. And I'm just going to say one because this is where I think it begins. Okay. As a church, and I haven't announced this anywhere, so this is, you get to be the first. Everybody's watching
an
this.
Exclusive premiere.
It's an exclusive premiere. So this and the 50 plus community, that's first. So I have to include them too. They got to see it first. So you're second. But that's still pretty high.
It's still pretty good.
That's still pretty good.
Additional reason to watch this show.
Yeah, you could be second on the list.
That's right, exactly.
So anyway,
second in the know, yes.
We are going to set aside the first Wednesday of every month and come together as a church and worship and pray.
Awesome.
And the reason we desire to do that is because we want to create an atmosphere where God can take new ground in us before he takes new ground through us. And so as a church, massive goal, takes years to accomplish. Bring it all the way back to today. Yeah. We want to create an atmosphere for God to take new ground in us before he takes a new ground through us. And so we're going to gather every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock right here in the worship center from 7 to 8. And we're going to pray our adult discipleship and all of the classes and all of the things, the rehearsals, I mean, we are sacrificing huge to do this. And I've asked every pastor and every leader to leverage and figure out a way to solve the problem of how we can set this time aside so that it interrupts our schedule. We could have done it on a different night, but we wanted it to interrupt our schedule, because this is a happening place around here on Wednesday nights,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Jim?
It is, yes.
We wanted to interrupt a busy night
Yep.
to say once a month, first Wednesday every month, let's remind ourselves that God is first here at Weston Assembly of God. He has called us to this direction. We know the details are coming, but let's head there together.
All right.
And let's head there together in prayer.
Does this start in May?
In May, right after
First
Easter.
Wednesday in May?
First
All right.
Wednesday in May.
First Wednesday in May at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock
Right here. All right. Very much something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Shane, you talked about how the Israelites, when they crossed, God had them pick up stones from the middle of the river and then build a monument. And you referenced even our wall that we have, our timeline wall in the foyer as a monument.
Yeah.
Should we, as ourselves, in order to help us move forward, actually set up monuments to God's work in our own lives so that we can better remember what God has done? And what might we use as stones?
That's a great question, and I think the sky's the limit. It's limitless how you can do this. And we do it all the time in our life, in our culture. You have a birthday.
Right.
You celebrate the year, the day that you were born. Every year. Most people celebrate it. Some people like to forget it. The older we get, we say, never mind, I'm good.
That's right.
I've celebrated it enough. But you celebrate. You celebrate anniversaries. You celebrate special moments. Sometimes there's monuments that aren't happy. Like the day I lost someone. I remember, my mother-in-law who passed, and each time that comes around, how painful that is. We loved her and we miss her.
Yeah.
And those of us, or you could be, it could be any number of things that lost. So it could be a new career that we celebrate. We do that around here at church, anniversaries of your work anniversary or when you started here. We celebrate those kinds of things. I think we ought to do that in our spiritual walk as well. Write down dates in your Bible and put a date and put something that happened. I was taught that when I was coming up in the church, to write down the date that I crossed the line of faith for the first time. And I have the date written down. I know this is the date, and here's when I came to Christ, and here's the date. And I don't always remember, and you don't have to remember the exact dates. You just might remember the year. Or remember, there's a monument, there's a stone. Sometimes I have some stones, literal stones in my office that were special to me. I marked special missions trips or places that I've come back from. Yeah. I've seen Pastor Hirschman's has a collection of these kinds of things together, and he collects them, and from every place that he goes around the world and ministers, he brings something back. It's such a great, maybe journal, however you want to do it, but mark the times. We mark times, all kinds of things in our life. What could be more important than marking a time when God did something in the life of an organization or the life of an individual in your personal walk with God? Let's mark those times.
I love that. So as many of us are probably marking times in a schedule or a to-do list every day.
Yeah.
Put one entry, at least one entry down a day for God, right?
Yeah,
something
that's
that
good.
something that you recall him doing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
There's even apps for that. You don't hear that anymore, but there's still apps
there's an app for that. Yeah.
Apps still exist. Speaking of monuments, Palm and Easter Sundays themselves are, in essence, kind of monuments as well to a very important time in the history of the church and in our very own lives.
Absolutely.
So those are also optimal opportunities to expand. Speaking of expansion, what can WEAGers do to advance our vision, knowing that Easter season is typically a great opportunity for non-church going people to attend a service?
Well, first I would say the relationships you're invested in your neighborhood, at your workplace, around town, at restaurants that you frequent or businesses you frequent, you've already invested there. Go ahead and invite them. Invite them to what's happening at church. This is a culturally acceptable time of year.
It's true.
To invite somebody to church. And it's okay to assume, at least thankfully in America, that's still a part of our culture where Easter and Christmas, these are 2 times a year that people typically think about going to church. It's not offensive at all for me to say, hey, Jim, I don't know if you guys have any plans on Easter. I'd love for you to come visit our church with
Yeah.
me and come to church with me. Maybe you could plan to do something after, maybe more enticing, give them a dinner, or the fact that there are family plans going on. Say, hey, this is an easier time to invite somebody. There's no expectation, because I know you have your family event after, but come to church. Our church services are on Easter Sunday, or 9 and 10:45. So you're still going to get out of here. We have a sunrise service for those really, really want to hit it early.
Early risers, yeah.
At 6 o'clock. And so 6, that's crazy early. But there's a lot of people who are going to come when the sun is rising, have a wonderful, beautiful service. Then at 9 o'clock, we'll have our full worship service right here in the worship center. And then at 10:45, we also have a Good Friday service at 7 o'clock right here as well. And noon, 12 o'clock and 7 o'clock. We have 2 different styles all together. And that's the other thing, is here's what you can expect when you invite your friends. If you haven't been to West End Assembly of God for a while, God is doing some amazing things. Yeah. We have seen, we've said that we want every generation and every culture to influence the way we worship, serve, and lead at West End Assembly of God. Well, let me tell you, the way we worship, the expression of our worship has been greatly influenced just in the last 5 or 6 months that we've been worshiping together, that God's created something new. So if you think you know what it is to worship at WEAG, you don't if you haven't been here in the last 4 or 5 months, because we have every generation and every culture influencing our worship. It's an amazing expression. This great gospel choir with this great just worship band and orchestra. It's a collage and mosaic of expression of worship that we're so excited about, and can't wait to introduce some of you, if you haven't been here, to come back and take a look. But invite your friends that you've invested relationship with. Invite them, ask them to come to church with you and see what God can do. And you never know what's going to happen. We're just praying that we see people's lives transformed on Easter Sunday.
It is really neat that our church is transformed. God has blessed it to such a point that you can invite anyone and they'll find people, they'll see people and meet people that they can relate to.
No matter what culture or generation, we have something on the menu for them.
Yeah.
So,
Job doesn't matter. Bring them here. They will find someone that they can relate to for sure. And speaking of Easter, to wrap up, you've heard that expression, Easter egg.
Yeah.
In gaming, there's Easter eggs. Pixar, every Pixar movie has Easter eggs. We've actually had an Easter egg here on set that you may not have noticed, but these screens behind each of us feature actually the artwork for the next series coming up.
Nice.
So Shane, what are we
going
to look forward to?
Exactly.
Yeah,
nice.
A little subliminal going on. So what's coming up? What can we look forward to this Easter season?
Yeah, I mean, Easter is an event that changed everything, right? So that's the way we're celebrating it here. We know something happened so many thousands of years ago that still impacts us today and going forward. In fact, it impacts you in a way that you can't even imagine. And how can we have this chaos all around us but yet have peace? We're going to talk about that on Palm Sunday and how Jesus walks peace. Something happened that changed everything. That Good Friday, that irony of that word, on the day that Jesus gave his life and was crucified, so that we could have forgiveness of sins. And then we're going to celebrate the fact that he's risen again. And that's something that happened. Whether you believe in that or not, there's something here that's going to happen in your life. And we're believing that if you come here this Easter, something's going to happen for you as well, and for you and your family and your friends that you bring with you. So I can't wait to celebrate. It's going to be a great, great season together.
Absolutely. That sounds awesome. Peace in the midst of chaos. I'm sure the majority of our viewers would love that.
Yeah.
So for sure.
We need some peace in the midst of chaos. That's for sure.
So, well, thank you very much for tuning in. That's all of our questions for today. Again, if you're watching this on demand at a later point, please use the comment area. You can still ask your question. Just give us a little bit of time to get that question to Shane, and so that way he can provide a response back to you. But in the interim, please join us at 10 a.m. this coming Sunday for the start of our next series, a new series. Join us on site or online. We would love to have you with us. And if you missed this past sermon that we were just talking about, you can find all the sermons at weag.church. just right there on the home page. There's a drop down for sermons. You can look them up by sermon series, speaker, topic, all sorts of stuff. It's wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you very much,
Yeah,
Shane.
thank you.
It's so great to delve into this series with you
Absolutely.
each week. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Jim.
Have
Thank
a
you
blessed
for
week.
watching.
Thanks for watching. All right.
Bye-bye.